the divergent channels were once known as the primary channels, the main channels. So if you read chapter 11 of the Ling Shu, it says the major channels are the divergents, they call them major, and that these should be studied first before any other channel. And then, to cut a long story short, within 150 years of that text being written down, a couple of major things disappeared from the classical texts. One of them was the Great Low of the Stomach, for example. And by the Song dynasty, so the Song dynasty is, around the 10th to the 13th century, around that period, with the introduction of the Imperial Academy, they cut out all of the channels that are not called primary today. So they took out the divergents, the lows, the sinews, and they left the what we call the primaries, which they call the river channels or the waterways. They left those intact, and they left an echo of the 8 extra channels. It's another long story because they were not needled anyway. And so if we fast forward to the 1950s, when acupuncture had been banned for quite a few decades, and Mao decides he's going to bring acupuncture back, but acupuncture had already been standardized for 1,000 years. So the Song dynasty took acupuncture and standardized it. It's actually one of the great things that they did was collect thousands of herbal formulas, and they standardized it, like everything that you could imagine, dance and qigong and herbs. And so to this day, people think that an herbal formula is what you use for, if you want to tonify the spleen, Buzhong Yiqi Wan. I'm not an herbalist, don't get the wrong idea, but Buzhong Yiqi Wan, here you go, that's going to be for you. And that's not at all how herbs were practiced before the Song dynasty, before they were standardized. The formulas were understood to be teaching formulas. So they taught you what the principal herb in balance with the associate herb, in balance with the harmonizer. They were teaching structures by writing down these formulas. So in the song, when the Imperial Academy it's like politics actually, that they were all herbalists, all of them. None of them was an acupuncturist, and they hated acupuncture and they hated acupuncturists. And if an acupuncturist said, "Oh no, I want to practice the divergent channels, I want to practice the lows and all these precious things," they were taken and banished to Southeast, what is now Southeast Asia. So they were taken to places like Vietnam, which is a lovely place to be banished to, and that is why when you go to Vietnam, you see some elements of pre-Song dynasty acupuncture there. There are some classical elements actually left down there, which is quite amazing. It's like, and in Japan too. In Japan, there are elements of classical acupuncture there too. So. The point that I was trying to make was that the divergent channels, really, and Sophie, they are the primary channels. Yeah, and you could make an argument. Anything that you use on the day in that hour is the primary channel for that person. This channel is primary, and the idea that we are left as a culture only with primary channels means that the acupuncture community, the modern acupuncture community practicing TCM, innocently, and they are trying so hard to treat chronic degenerative diseases and not knowing why they're not successful. Why is it that I can't, like someone comes to me with, this is TCM, right? Why is it if someone comes to me with multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease or rheumatoid arthritis, why is it that all I can hope to help them with is pain or sleep or appetite, or why isn't that Well, maybe it doesn't even occur to them, to be that it is possible and actually simple to reverse these conditions way back to beyond their formation. So that the divergent channels are considered primary in the classical texts because they can do that. Oh, you're off course? Divergent channel, let's bring it back on. You diverged, let's come back. Whereas the primary channels cannot reach the parts of the body where pathology has been put away. And so we'll talk about that in great detail. So no, there are no secondaries here. Well, when I published my book, I took my book to Jeffrey in 2011 or something, 2012, and I gave it to him and I said, well, would you edit this please? And he said, with pleasure. And it took me 6 months to get it back. He made 30 minor corrections, and I have all that on a souvenir PDF. and he said just one thing. He said, you might consider, which means don't you dare, right? Changing the subtitle, which was Protocols for the Secondary Channels. You might consider that. And so, then I put 30 people on it. I had emails all over the place, like, we have to come up with a word. And eventually, it was me that came up with the word, actually, complement, which means the rest. Oh, that's right. The other thing he said to me, if you can't come up with a word, just call them the other channels. Well, I didn't want to have a book saying protocols for the other channels. Right. Is it back now? Okay, thank you. The divergent channels, it's the class of channel where there is the greatest amount of alchemy, because the divergent channels actually do not exist in a body when it's born. A person might never ever need a divergent channel, and they don't actually have one resident. They have to be created, and the way in which they are created is miraculous, but the patient can create a divergent channel, and the practitioner can create a divergent channel in the patient, which sounds pretty wacky, but since they don't exist, they are a construct that can, or a frequency that can be called into the body. And to understand how they work, we first of all, we've got to understand what's actually going on in the body when it feels threatened and it needs to do something. So we're talking about this whole story about divergent channels is about the resolution of a pathogen. So what is a pathogen? We have to establish what a pathogen is first. Across the board in medicine, a pathogen, as we know in classical texts, wind and cold are the origin of thousands of diseases. So wind, and it's important to discuss this because when you translate the meanings of these pathogens onto the channel and the points where these channels land, then suddenly you can tie why that pathogen entered with the mind of the practitioner and then the need for a divergent scenario to emerge. Okay, so teaching Chinese medicine is not easy and it's not linear. So what you're going to find over today is that there will be like pieces of information that come in, and then they don't seem to connect to the next piece of information, and then there's another piece that comes in and another piece. So you've sort of got to build it. You have to build it up, and you don't know what this building is going to look like. And then all of a sudden the whole thing fuses together. So you will feel that you have many questions along the way, and I'm pretty sure that you don't need to ask them just yet. I'll ask for questions at a point where I think, if you don't get that much by now, I need to know that you don't know. Okay, so cold. Let's take cold first. Let's take wind, actually. Wind is a word that can mean literally wind. If you went out in the wind and you were improperly dressed, for sure you could get sick, for sure. But the word wind means so much more. It means, it stands for instability, right? If you have internal wind, it means you have a deficiency of mediumship. The word mediumship, for those who haven't studied with me before, mediumship means stuff you can weigh. Fluids, blood, Qing, muscles, organs, anything that you can weigh has a yin aspect to it. If mediumship, if stuff that you can weigh, if fluids become depleted, if blood volume becomes depleted, if Qing is wasted, there will be an instability in the body, just like if you have a deficiency of water in your pipes at home after plumbing work, the water is unstable. So the only thing is, in plumbing, it really is wind that's in the pipes, but in the human body, as these resources go into decline, either quickly or over a long period of time, there is an instability, and you can see it when those deficiencies become advanced, like in multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's disease or essential tremor, when you actually see the shaking, you actually see the instability. So the word wind, and now I am talking about like wind on the exterior, is a metaphor for the fact that one's life is completely unpredictable. You don't know what the next moment is going to bring, actually, and often something will come in like, oh, you want a divorce, right? Or, oh, that tax bill, there's no way I can pay it. Or oh, my son died. Right, you don't know what's going to happen, and the Chinese call that wind. The unpredictability of what may happen, and I shouldn't make it all negative, it's your birthday and you think that you're going to be lonely on your birthday, and then you go out to take your dog for a walk and there are 3 of your friends at the door with a cake, right? So that would be wind too, like, whoa, I didn't expect that, oh my gosh, it's so fantastic, right? So let's hope it's not a chocolate cake, because then your mediumship's going to fall. But so this wind, the idea in the philosophy of Chinese medicine is that life has its turns, and on top of that, and this is Taoist medicine, that every single turn in life that seems unpredictable especially is something that you signed up for before you incarnated. So the wind is said to push you, in other words, the seemingly unstable, and they're not, but the seemingly unstable circumstances of life push you in certain direction. Okay, you've got to get fired from that job, that relationship breaks up, that house burns down, well, the bank takes that, or whatever, and so you're going back and forth, and the whole while you are on track, but the act of resisting it causes the divergent channels to have to act, and we'll get there, how that gets there in shortly. The next pathogen is cold. So we think of cold as being, and certainly if you went out in the freezing cold, and if you were anyone but Wim Hof and you went out in the cold, you were definitely going to get sick, right? Mind you, Wim Hof drinks a lot of scotch at night time, right? He's got to get warm somehow. But so you're going, if you're out in the cold, You definitely will get sick. Your body is going to have to use the sinews to defend itself against that cold. And we can talk, and we will talk about the pathogens in two different lights. One light, the actual physicality of it, and the other light, how it impacts on the mind. Because chapter 1 of the Ling Shu says, of the Su Wen says, all illness begins in the mind, which is an unfortunate translation. It really means, it says spirit. All illness begins in the spirit. It's a poor translation. It means what it actually says in the oral tradition is all illness begins in the mind and affects the spirit. So, right, so then we have cold. So cold is not just cold, the so-called element of cold, but cold translates in modern language as virus. In the old language, it would be cold brings a necessity for change. And so if you look at it from a Western medical point of view, which I think is a really effective way to do it, if you have a look at a virus which comes in on the cold, viruses love cold, and when we get when we encounter a virus that is, you know, all the viruses reside in us anyway, right? So when we encounter a virus, it's really triggering. In other words, we encounter a virus with an extra vector on it that causes that virus to activate in our bodies. When we have a look at a virus is not alive. It has no brain, has no gut, has no nervous system. A virus is simply an inert package of instructions. That's all it is. It says, make these proteins, arrange it like this, arrange these proteins like this, and there you have the change. So the purpose of a virus, a viral infection, let's say a cold, common cold, is to have a period of time where you have a virus acting in your body like a package of instructions that says, you know, this change needs to occur. And what might that change be? It could be, and these are happening all the time. We're breathing in 10 to the 41, that's 10 with 41 zeros on it, for those of you who are not math inclined. An unimaginable number of viral particles we're breathing in all the time. They're not all valid at the same minute. But, so we're supposed to have this time with the common cold, which lasts 3 days, which is a period of cycle of Wei Qi, where we're still and we can register what the change is that is being instructed. It could be anything. It could be, you know, remember to walk up straight. It could be like time to drop that gig, it's actually time to move. Oh, time to wake up and notice that the wheat needs harvesting, right? Time to, you know, do this ritual. Time to notice that the sun is going to set. All these shifts that happen that are virally mitigated, virally instigated, need to be noticed so that in every moment there is an awareness of what needs to be said, what needs to be felt, what movement needs to be made, so that we're constantly alive and not habituated. So if we lived like that, if we were completely spontaneous, which does not mean not planning and does not mean not having common sense, you know, if we live like that and we're noticing everything with no judgment and being willing to shift and move, we can live a very, very fluid life. But ironically, part of the reason we come here is to experience these resistances. So if the cold is resisted, if the instructions, the viral instructions, which they would have called the instructions of wind cold, which gets watered down over the millennia to just mean common cold, but it's not. The instructions on the wind. What is the change on the wind that's required in this individual being? What humans have a habit of doing, especially since the culture has messed us up and taught us that we should desire this, we should desire to have this, we should desire to be with someone like this, we should desire to live in this way. We are, as a culture, inured to these instructions. So we resist them. No, I'm not going to do that. No way. Right? And these instructions come through to the unconscious mind as interests. It's funny, I'm suddenly interested in this. I'm suddenly interested in talking to that person. I'm suddenly interested in crossing the road. I'm suddenly interested in reading this book. I'm suddenly interested in sleeping. Right? All these things that when they are resisted, the virus, the wind cold, will not shift out of the body because it contains the instructions for following the blueprint. The body will not let go of it. The spirit, the blueprint, the spirit engaged with the plan will not allow that cold to be eradicated from the body. It must be held in. That wind cold containing that instruction for what comes next must be contained. Meanwhile, the mind pushes it away. And this is the beginning of divergent channel activation. This is the beginning of not just chronic degenerative disease, but the voluntary yielding of the actual resources of the body, the flesh and the organs themselves, the sacrificing of all of that within the body in the hope that one day that individual will come alive and change their mind. If you ask a person why they have an advanced cancer, though it's amazing how often they'll tell you exactly what happened. When were you diagnosed? Well, I was diagnosed in 2006. Okay, what happened in 2005? This is the most important question you ask in acupuncture. When did it start? Oh, what happened in 2005? Oh, well, a lot happened in that year. Yeah, I had a horrible divorce. Okay, so when they can track it back down to an event, then you know, you don't even have to ask. You say, well, and how did you go with that? She said, well, you know, it was, you couldn't believe what it was like. It was like I didn't marry, who is this person that I married? It's like, you can't imagine what he or she did, and then you get it spelled out, and the tension, the resentment, even the hate is still there, and the divergent channel is having to defend the internal organs all this time until they are worn away and depleted. And we'll talk about exactly how this happens. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that the divergent channels are enacted when the body resists change. Now, if that's too esoteric, let's explain it in a much more mundane way. So, the first thing that happens when there's a cold and wind that's coming into the body is, now we're talking about literal cold. we're not supposed to live like that. We're supposed to be, covered in animal skins, and we're not supposed to be out at night. We couldn't see anyway. We're supposed to be from inside, and with the campfire or whatever, or huddled together in the skins and the hay and whatever, from sunrise to sunset. That's how we're manufactured. The electric light bulb has an enormous impact on health. So then you're cold. So you're standing outside. It's cold and windy, and the first thing you're going to do is this. Right? That's familiar, isn't it? Okay. And what is happening is the bladder sinew, which covers the entire back of the body, like the entire posterior aspect of the body, the bladder sinew, which conducts Wei Qi, tightens up because, and you don't even think about it. You don't think, oh, now I'm going to like tighten my back up and try to make myself. The sinews carry Wei Qi, and Wei Qi is unthinking. In a sense, it has no intelligence. It just does that. And in another sense, if you look at it through a different lens, it has optimal intelligence. It has such incredible intelligence that it appears to us that it has no intelligence. But it's like, well, it knows to do that, and it overrides the mind and does it. So it will do that. And then let's say the cold approaches the sinew is defending, then the cold starts to penetrate that sinew channel, which means it's going past the skin. The skin is busy making goosebumps. That's Wei Qi activating. Wei means defensive Qi. Is everyone familiar with the term Wei Qi? Right, okay. Wei Qi. Wei Qi means defensive. You could call it offensive, moving, warming, receptive Qi. It's receptive Qi too because it's Wei Qi that emanates from your body and senses what the barometric pressure is, what the temperature is, whether it's going to rain, whether or not to walk into that room or that store, whether or not to engage with that person. That's all, without thinking or looking. That's Wei Qi that senses that no, or smoke over there, grass fire coming from there, go this way. That's all Wei Qi, receptive Qi. But in its defensive sense, it's going to tighten, and then the skin will develop goosebumps. So the purpose of the goosebumps is to get the hairs to stand out, to try to create a buffer. So to create to be able to trap warmth, to make ourselves thicker, right? And then if that fails and the cold and the wind start to penetrate, then the sinews are going to call upon their other resources, fluids, to create a sweat. And there will be, then you're not going to sweat then, you're going to sweat when you get home because the body knows not to sweat in the cold and wind. So the cold and wind gets stuck in the sinew. You go home, you go, oh my gosh, I got so cold. And in the 1960s, when you got home, because I was born in 1964, I remember distinctly a day when I came home from school, because we all walked to school and back by ourselves when we were from the age of 5. It was like the world wasn't like it is now. And I remember distinctly I came back and I was drenched, absolutely sopping wet. And my mother opened the front door and she said, whoop, and she picked me up and she just put me straight in the bath. And she's in the empty bathtub, and she said, oh, let's take all these clothes off and let's like make you a nice hot bath. And that's like it's just the way people knew what to do. Oh, that's cold, got to warm it up. And these days, who was it that was telling me? Oh, it was Patrizia was telling me, like in her neighbourhood, she'll see, the teenagers walking around and the water will be dripping off them, and they just sort of sit down and carry on, and the cold water's going down inside their shirt collars, and it's just like no big deal. And her idea is that the British are so tough, right? And is that true, Cal? Yeah, okay. So Anyway, the next stage of that sinew defense, this is all important, by the way, I'm not just off on a tangent. There's so the next stage is for that sweat to come. So when the body is then in a safe space, oh, and the shivering too, by the way, shivering, that's Wei Qi too. Let's bring as much Wei Qi to the surface as we can and try to warm up the surface and break up the cold. Cold has to be broken up. And then the next stage is for the sweat to come. So Wei Qi, defensive Qi, is manufactured from kidney yang and stomach fluids. So it has a very fast warming action, and it has a fluid sweating capacity. So then the pores open. That's Wei Qi that opens the pores, and it's Wei Qi that pushes fluids, sweat, out through the pores, and with it the pathogenic factor. Cold, wind, pushed out through sweat, but also could be toxins, could be anything, could be heavy metals that it pushes out through sweat. It could be pharmaceuticals, herbicides, pesticides, anything. And when there are actual toxins coming out through the sweat, then the sweat smells weird, smells funny. So that will be, that's all Wei Qi. And ideally, there's enough yang, kidney yang, which is the root of Wei Qi. We'll talk about how. And there's enough fluids being produced by the stomach to create this big action. Then you can say the cold is eradicated and the person goes back to living life, and hopefully while they were experiencing that wind cold, as it was coming out, they invited the opportunity of being conscious of what that change was trying to bring. So now I'm mixing the two together. If the sinews fail, the traditional teaching uses the primary channel to teach the stages of disease, and what I want you to know before I draw it is that the stages of disease, or the different phases of the body's response to these pathogens, external pathogens, cold, wind, even damp, if you're living in a damp basement apartment or something, the stages of illness are not literally affecting the primary channel. So I just want to say that before I draw that. Oh, okay. It's okay, drawing my good. Thank you. So if we take this. So they're using the metaphor, the primary channel and its functions as a metaphor. I have no idea what that happens. I'm sorry. For the journey of a pathogen. So at the end of the primary channel, you have the Qing well point. If there's insufficient kidney yang and there are insufficient stomach fluids, the sinew channels cannot perform their actions. They can't. So a person who is dehydrated and exhausted, how do we make kidney yang? Kidney yang is made by recycling Wei Qi. So the whole day there's Wei Qi being used to move, because Wei Qi moves the musculature. But there's expenditure, but there's also nourishment. So we're eating, hopefully we're eating, really good food and manufacturing fluids and manufacturing qi. And those products, especially the qi, in 7th and 8th hours of sleep, that qi comes back, and the unused wei qi, excuse me, from the musculature comes back into the kidneys to be stored in the kidneys in the 7th and 8th hours of sleep. A person who's sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night is going to be progressively more and more exhausted. They might not know it because their adrenal glands, the adrenal glands might not know it because, the patient might not know it because the adrenal glands are active. So they're running on adrenaline. They're drinking coffee so they can keep going. They don't even know how tired they are. They're tired because there's this very important 7th and 8th hours of sleep collecting the qi, the products of digestion of the day, and the wei qi that's not used does not happen. So eventually a person finds that they are susceptible cold. They feel that they're susceptible to cold. They develop into a person who can't stand wind. I just can't stand it. Let's get out of the wind. They start wrapping themselves up more. They become more sensitive to the cold. They want to go outside less. These are people who are not nourishing the components of wei qi, kidney yang and stomach fluids. And if a person is vegetarian, they need to be very, very careful that their food is served hot. Because many vegetarians and vegans have a very big problem, actually, that they don't have the yang qi of animal foods. So they have to get yang qi from other places, like, it's very difficult, but they need to get yang qi from protein, so they need to make sure their protein levels are high. But everybody needs to have plenty of fluids in their diet to nourish stomach fluids in order to finance wei qi. So that means the diet our general cultural diet needs to return back to where it was before the 60s. So I'm old enough to remember that there was soup with every meal, except breakfast. Breakfast was porridge, that was wet. Some kind of porridge, some kind of gruel. And then always, if you were home, always there was lunch, soup with lunch, and dinner there was always a bowl of soup first, always. And that went on until, really that went out of favour in the mid-70s, I think, or slightly earlier. To the people who are my age, do you remember this? Yeah, you're not my age. Yeah, I'm sorry. If I look at you, I'm looking at you with my right eye. So often I'm looking at someone and they turn around and see who I'm looking at, but my left eye just has a different blueprint somehow. Anyway, so the diet is crucial to the recovery from chronic degenerative diseases, but it's also crucial to the prevention of all diseases. The diet must be wet, primarily wet, and it must be warm. And I'm not trying to sell you anything, but if you need inspiration for getting back on that track, my husband's books are right in that pocket on purpose, welcoming food. So this is the starting point. If the sinews are, if the body's depleted and tired and the sinews cannot act sufficiently to ward off a cold or wind, and so the person is stuck with this, we say that the Jing-well point has failed, and that is just jargon. That means the sinews have failed. Sinews have failed. And the primary channel, the channel that emanates and operates the actual internal organs, that's the primary channel, the river channels, the ones that we call lung, large intestine, spleen, stomach, small intestine, that whole list of 12 that connect with the organs, those channels, so each organ is emanating a channel. And on that channel, if you wanted to break up the functions of that channel, you would put points on it that describe the increasing threat to the safety of the organ. That's what these points are. I think this is just not good. No, I'll just do it by mouth. So the second point on the primary channel is a metaphor for the function of the channel that emanates from the organ if the sinews fail. That's the yin spring point, Y-I-N-G, which means fluids. So the yin spring point is it's a hot point on the yin channels, and it's a cooling point on the yang channels. And that point helps to create a fever and then cool it down. So what are you going to do if you've got cold and wind, the origin of all diseases, cold and wind, or resistance of the mind, which is tied to cold and wind? What are you going to do if the sinews fail? Well, then you're going to have to create a fever. And so the body will make tremendous heat. Now the person's in bed. They were out, trying to catch an Uber with wet hair at 1 a.m. And the next day they come home and it's like, oh, mommy, I don't feel so good. Right? So now they're in bed. Mum's making some soup from vegetables she's got. I'm exaggerating. I'm not half. That's true. But she's very independent. But like normally, mommy would or daddy would make a big soup. Okay, like this is the stuff of cartoons, right? This is like, oh, this is what you do. This is not. Yes, this is normal. So the warmth, the hot soup enables the body to accumulate enough heat that it can produce a fever. Fevers are extremely important in our culture. Western medicine equates fevers with inflammation, and we all know where inflammation goes. Inflammation becomes septicemia, and so we have to give you Tylenol or whatever drug to stop that fever, and that is one major cause of chronic degenerative diseases right there, stopping the fever right there. So the second point on the primary channel, their spring point, is it helps you tell the story of the defense of the organ. So now we have a fever, but the fever is suppressed by a drug, or the fever cannot, because the person is, we already know, tired. They can't produce enough wei qi. So now the person cannot produce a fever because they cannot raise the yang qi. They don't have enough yang qi. It doesn't express. And then when it does express, there's not enough fluid to carry that heat up so that the heat can move through and out through the pores, carrying the pathogenic factor with it. So then we say, if the fever fails, the yin spring point has failed. It's just all metaphor. The next point is the shu stream point. So that's usually it is the third point on the primary channel, and the stream point has a function like a. Are you with me? Yeah, you are?
It's my notebook.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So it's not school or anything. I'm not like poor. I just thought if you're already bored, we're in trouble. Okay. And so the stream point has a quality like a saloon door. So do you have saloon doors in Great Britain? Yeah. So it's not the Wild West, like, in I mean, I didn't watch Westerns at all when I was a kid, but you know, the saloon door swings both ways. So the shoestring point tries to push it out, meaning the channel is going to bring yang qi to itself to try to clear itself. That's the shoestring point. And it either fails, oh sorry, that's succeeding. Okay, so it either succeeds or it fails. It swings the other way, and then the pathogen is now threatening the channel more. So the traditional teaching is now it's further up the channel, but it's not. It is that the channel is further threatened. And the next point is the Yuan source point, the third or the fourth point on the channel. The source point has a saucer-like nature. And it is the first point on the body that where a pathology can sit. That's finally now we've got a container. So the pathology can be arrested at the source point. But that's not what source points are for. Source points are for the stimulation of the distribution of yuan qi from the kidneys to the organ so that the organ is bathed in yuan qi and can express emotion. That's its function. So the body will not accept this being here at the moment, that pathology sitting in the source point. It pushes it up. So it pushes it up and out, and then it moves on, and the next point is the low point. So at the low point, finally, there is a reservoir that's appropriate. So the pathology comes in, it settles in the low point, which just simply means that the pathology is settling into blood in the channel that relates to that organ. So then the pathology comes in and it sinks into the low point, and then from there it grows, the body grows spider veins which come off ad infinitum, pointed downward into the moderate flesh, and the pathology is stored in blood, which is an excellent container if it is not in general circulation. So the spider veins are so fine that if you look at them under a microscope, you see one single, blood cell moving along it extremely slowly. So the low vessels will hold that, and they can hold them for a very long time. They could hold them for decades, just low vessel, that pathology, just sitting there. And then after a while, for various reasons, there is blood deficiency, or there's a yang deficiency, can't do any building, or that region becomes saturated because the pathologies don't stop. The person is still living in a house with terrible mold, they're still drinking water with lead in it, they're still going out within like a tank top in the winter, or whatever that pathogen is, it doesn't stop. And so this quest to keep this increasing pathology in the low vessels cannot be sustained. And then, as you know, lows connect with source points. So let's say I have been talking about the bladder channel so far, then the bladder lows will be communicated to the elementally paired channel, which will be the kidney, and that will store the pathogen. So now the partner channel will store the pathogen in the Yuan source point, but there's a problem with that. Same story, it can't do it. I'm nearly done, Cal. Yeah. So now you're asking another source point to hold the pathology. It says, no, thank you very much. It passes it up to its low. So now we're at the kidney low. So the kidney low builds all the spider veins and holds the pathology there until it's exhausted. And then ultimately, low to source, says, well, I can't do any more, passes it back to the original source point, says, well, I've seen this before, it can't be here, it moves it up to the low point, well, we've seen this before, we're full, sorry. So it's done this sort of zigzag, now it's come back, now it's in the original channel at the low point, that's full, so then it passes it to the Qing river point. It doesn't mean it's going up the primary channel. It means that the function of the river point on that entire channel activates. The function of river points is to create rebellious qi. So now the coughing starts. For no reason, the person has seems to have persistent cough. They have an annual bronchitis. It's really strange, and they become nauseous, and they might start vomiting. Well, where is this coming from? Coughing and occasional vomiting. So that is rebellious qi trying to find another avenue for pushing this pathology off. If the Qing river point fails, then the next point, which means the next level deeper in the pathology related to the primary channel, is the Hsi point, which means, it's metaphor for the organ. Now, the body has tried everything. It's tried to keep this cold and dampness, or this resistance to change, this resistance to being on one's blueprint. It's taken that resistance and now all of that pathology is going to land in the actual organ. And this is the point. I'll just tell you one short story. Some of you have heard this already. I'll be really quick. There's a very famous picnic ground near Melbourne where I was born, and one Sunday, I'm pretty sure it was like 1970, and so we went out, and my brother is 2 years younger than me, excuse me, and we went to this place called, it's called Hanging Rock. Has anyone been there? No, probably no one's been there. Anyway, it was in the 70s, it was a very famous place to go. And you would go, and families, because no one had any money, right? So you just go on a Sunday drive. Everyone went on a Sunday drive. No one got on airplanes to go somewhere for a weekend or something. It was, so we're at this picnic ground, and they have, it's in the country, and they have barbecues, and so my mum and dad, and there were some friends with us too, and they had sausages on the barbecue, and and a loaf of bread, and you're supposed to take your loaf of bread and put some tomato sauce on it, and then put your sausage on the bread, and fold it in a triangle. So my brother, who must have been 5 or something, 4, he does it. He's so excited. He loved sausages. He loved it, and he grabs the sausage, and then he's so happy. He's just beaming, the sausage, and simple pleasures it was in those days. And then he goes back and he walks back to sit with me on the log, and he's looking at the sausage, and he's just about to bring it into his mouth, and all of a sudden, and he still remembers, and he's traumatized still at the age of 58, and he's bringing it to his mouth, and all of a sudden a kookaburra, you know what a kookaburra is? Yeah, there's this beautiful big kingfisher that has an extraordinary laugh, and the kookaburra comes out of nowhere, and it comes and it grabs the sausage, and it goes up to the tree, and the sausage is gone. That is a divergent action. The pathology is coming, right? The mouth and the sausage, right? The pathology is coming to the organ, and it's about to go into the organ. Now, what's the problem with pathology in organ? Deadly. That is wind cold that has become I want to say Jeffrey uses the word transformation, but it is combined now with heat, the heat that was responding. It's picked up all of this dampness, trying to control it. You know, it's got blood involved, it's got all this mess that the body's done, all these beautiful things to try to get rid of it, to try to push it off, to get it realized and then to move it off. And all of that has failed, and the body has worked beautifully. Every event in that sequence is perfect. They're doing this, oh, beautiful defense, right? The sweating, the fever, the building of blood vessels to contain it, hoping that the consciousness will be brought to this invitation to change. These are all beautiful, perfect, brilliant responses. Then the coughing and the nausea, like can we protect the organ? All of these things, and all this exhaustion, and a lot of that very uncomfortable, all perfect. And if it gets to the organ, you have whatever that organ is, plus the suffix itis. You've got pleuritis if it's lungs, right? Bronchitis. You've got colitis. You've got Crohn's disease. You've got ileitis. You've got pyelonephritis, cystitis, hepatitis, cholecystitis, gastritis. You've got all the itises, and before we had all these heavy-duty suppressive drugs, that was death. Itis of an organ, that's the ultimate. So the study of Chinese medicine is the study of the 24/7 effort to prevent pathology or to defend the organ. 24/7 effort the body makes to defend the organ. And when we come back after tea, we're going to explain exactly where this channel comes from, how the body creates this channel to get the sausage.